Welcome to the 30-minute hour. It's the personal development podcast for the seven-figure entrepreneur who's looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner. Joining me as always, you know him as the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Happy Monday.
Yes, it is
Happy
indeed a
Monday.
happy Monday. Hopefully, everybody had a great Thanksgiving.
Everybody but the turkey. The turkey didn't have a good Thanksgiving at all. The turkey was like, man, look. I hate I hate this holiday.
Well, if the turkey,
No,
hey, look, if the turkey lived through it, it was a good Thanksgiving for the turkey.
it
That's
was
for
a
sure.
good Thanksgiving. That's right. The
All
turkey
right.
was elusive, a little elusive.
It might not have survived around here,
That's
but
right.
that's not what we're here to talk about today.
No.
Today, we're here to talk about the biggest IT problem that's keeping you from driving revenue. And this isn't something we've ever talked about on this show. That's why I'm really excited. And we really have a serious expert to help our business leaders get to that next level and discover what this problem is and move forward in a better direction. So, Ted, we're not going to belabor the point. We're just going to get right to it. We're just going to bring them on and have at it. All right. So, our guest, he is the owner of the Rocky Mountain CIO. He consults with small and medium-sized businesses, providing virtual chief information officer and chief information security officer services. He's published 2 books titled Cyber Safety and Unveiling Tech Debt. So please join me in welcoming to the 30-minute hour podcast, Dr. Ken Knapton.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. This is a fun discussion. I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been looking forward to this as well. Especially Ted. Ted has had his own IT company for the last 28 years. So this should be a very interesting dialogue. But
Absolutely.
Very
yeah,
nice.
I want to let's kind of give people the backstory. Like I said, backstage, Dr. Ken, I did a little research and I discovered that your passion for IT started with some classes you took in high school. You want to tell us about how that got started? What got you in this IT field?
Yeah, I remember way back when, and we're dusting off the cobwebs here. I mean, we're going way back, but yeah, it was in high school, and I had gone to just moved with my family. We'd gone to a new high school, and I heard all these people talking about this class they were taking that had to do with computers. And I thought, man, that sounds kind of interesting. I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. And so I took my first computer class, and realized that you actually can tell a computer what to do. I thought, they just come out of the box, right? You turn it on and it does stuff. But no, someone has to tell it what to do. So as soon as I started kind of playing around with programming and learning that in that class, I was hooked, and so much so that back then I was actually thinking that I might go in 2 different directions from a high school perspective, right? Just as long as what do you want to do with your life? Everybody's always asking you. And I thought I'd either be an electrical engineer or I would get into computer programming. And by my senior year, I had figured out that I wanted to code. And so I went to my electronics teacher and I said, look, I know I don't want to do this for my career. So I would prefer just not to come to your class. And we actually made a deal. He said, look, you spend your time writing a program for me that I can give to my students, and they can take online quizzes and stuff like that. And we can do that through the computer. You computerize all that for me during your time, and you don't have to take my class your senior year. I said, deal, done. And that's how it started.
And you've gone on to get your doctorate in IT, and again, you work as a CIO, you help these different companies. If you could go back to that high school version of yourself and become a mentor based off of what you know now, what advice would you give to that high school version of yourself?
Boy, that's a great question. One of the things that I didn't really understand coming into the field is just, and when I say this, you're going to say, well, Ken, how stupid can you be? It's just how much change there is, right, in the IT world. And I mean, I look back to when I first started, and I thought, hey, I've learned how to program. That's it. I'm done. I can now do this for the rest of my career. But I mean, I think I've learned what, 8 or 9 different programming languages during the time I was coding, and now, all of the security focus that I've taken on, and all the things that are new from a security perspective, and it's just always changing. So to more directly answer your question, if I could go back in time and mentor my younger self, I would say, don't stop learning. Don't ever think that you're done in this field, because it's always going to be changing, and there's always going to be new stuff.
Yeah, I think that's great, because a lot of people, they reject the change, or the change scares them. And I remember I was at a conference. This is automotive, and they were talking about like all the different technology that was coming up with the cars, and literally people were in the hallway upset, like mad at the speaker. He was a futurist and talking about how the technology was going to evolve and all of that, and they're in the hallway like, and I'm like, you're mad at technology? What's the deal? But no, I definitely, I agree with you. You really have to be constantly innovating. Ted, I mean, this is your world. I mean, what are your thoughts on just kind of staying current on the changes and all
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, just kind of going back to what Dr. Kim was saying as far as how things have changed. And I remember there was a time, when I first got into this, and everybody was kind of like, "Oh yeah, you guys are the computer people. I'm not IT. I'm not IT, right? That's you guys." Now everyone's IT, right? Everyone, like back then, we thought we were big stuff, and we talked about routers and switches and TCP/IP and all that. And now you got little kids talking about that because they're setting up the wireless router in their house, and they're the in-house network engineer, and they're probably in elementary school, right? So things have changed a whole lot, and everyone is a technology person. You can't say I'm not a technology person anymore.
I talk about that in my first book, the difference between digital natives and digital immigrants, right? All of us, we're those of us our age, we're all digital immigrants. All this stuff has come along as we've, during our lifetime, right? But our kids today, they're the digital natives, right? They're growing up with all of this already in their life. And it really is a vastly different world as they enter the workforce now, right? These people that have never known what a cassette tape is.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it's funny, like in my house, my 11-year-old son is the IT go-to guy.
Yeah.
Right? If anybody wants to figure out something with the remotes or anything technical with the station,
that's it. He's got it.
They'll go get him, and then he'll fix it and go on about his business.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, no, that's great. We definitely need to be, the change is constant. We need to stay on top of that. And you were talking about coding earlier. Please share the story of how you ended up writing the code that went on to become the Norton antivirus, which is very well known. I'm sure anybody that's looked at the computer for any length of time has seen this. Can you share that story?
Yeah, so this was very early in my career. And like I said, I started out as a software developer. So started out writing code, and I thought that's where I was going to be my whole career. I loved it. But one of the very first products that I worked on was at the time was LAN desk Virus Protect, and it was owned by Intel. So Landesk was a little company that had been started here in Utah, was purchased by Intel. Incidentally, this is the same technology that has survived, gone through multiple owners, gone public and private again, and today is known as Ivanti. So anyone in the IT world is probably familiar with the Ivanti set of tools to do management in an IT world, remote control, things like that. Well, at the time, antivirus, Landesk antivirus was part of that suite of tools. And that was the tool that I was working on and helping to develop. And I wrote the client end of that. So there's a client server application. I wrote the complete client side of that antivirus solution. And one of the really unique things that we had done with our code at that time, again, today it's maybe much more commonplace, but I made it so that we could swap in and out any antivirus engine on the back end. So Symantec was one of the antivirus engines that we would use, but we built our own front end client that would then connect to our client server application. And at the time, Symantec had only their consumer version of their antivirus software. So they approached Intel, and there were some discussions, and these at the time were, above my grade level. I was the programmer, so I wasn't involved in these early discussions. But at some point, Intel decided they didn't want to be in the antivirus space anymore. And Symantec really wanted to be in the enterprise space because they were purely consumer at that point. So they decided on an agreement to sell our product to Symantec. Well, at the time, at least the way I understood it, again, I wasn't involved in these conversations, but the way I understood it was Symantec was interested in that acquisition primarily for our customer base. They wanted to take their solution and they were going to shelve our technology and then sell their solution into our customer base. And so I was part of the due diligence on the technical side. So sat down with their programmers, worked through that whole due diligence process as we went through the sale. Anyway, long story short, they were quite impressed with our technology and decided instead to shelve their technology, and they rebranded the solution that I had written as Norton Antivirus Corporate Edition. So they still had their Norton Antivirus Consumer Edition that they were selling, but this was now a completely different code base, and it was my code with now their rebrand on it. And for years after that, years and years, I would walk into a hotel and look down at the icons on the machine, and I'd see the little icon that I wrote, the program I wrote running on that computer. And I thought, man, if we had just negotiated, $1 for every install for me, that would have been a great deal.
Wow,
oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So you're currently a fractional CIO, right? Can you explain to people kind of what that is and kind of who you help and how you help them?
Yeah. So the fractional role is really very interesting. So I've spent the last 20 years in the CIO seat in various industries. I've worked in healthcare. I've worked in finance, financial services, nonprofit. So I've done lots of stuff. Well, as a fractional CIO, I can take my experience and bring it to a company who, first of all, wouldn't be able to afford to hire someone with my experience. But secondly, they usually can't even afford to hire a full-time CIO, even at an entry level, right? They're a smaller company. They're trying to improve their services, remove friction, which is what CIOs do. And to Ted's point a little earlier, every company is now a tech company. Every individual now has to be a tech person in some way. And so these smaller companies still have need of strategic CIO and CISO services, right? Because the security is a concern for everyone, and strategically leveraging your IT resources and planning your IT services to meet your strategic goals of your company, those apply no matter what size company you are. So in the fractional role, I get to just split my time between multiple companies. And instead of dedicating myself full-time to one company, I can take on multiple companies, work directly with them, work on their executive teams with their staff, and act as though I am, a full-time member of their executive team, but I'm giving them part of my time. And so it works out well, for me, it works out well for them. And really the concept came from CFOs have been doing this for a long time, fractional CFOs, right? So we just kind of took that same concept and applied it to the CIO world. And so that's how it works. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and you've worked in multiple industries. I mean, you worked in healthcare, you've worked in mortgages, banking, and even others. So what are the common technology challenges that you see, no matter like what industry you're in?
Yeah, so first of all, the companies or the industries that I've worked in have tended to be those industries that are highly regulated. And with intense regulation comes a lot of compliance, oversight, governance, and these are all words that tend to be 4-letter words for IT organizations and for companies. Nobody likes governance. They feel like it's heavy, and we're going to put too much process in place and not actually get work done. But I think that brings a lot of value, because again, cybersecurity applies to everyone. Everyone is at risk of some sort of breach. Data is gold, right? So everyone has to be able to protect it. So anyway, so that's kind of how I take my focus there on security, big data, and all that kind of stuff, and bring it to these smaller companies to help them in all those same needs that they have.
So Dr. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, so that's really the point right there. I guess it's like you said, data is the gold.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can't afford to lose it or have it corrupted or whatever, then you got to find some way to protect it from a cybersecurity standpoint, and and then all the other things that a CIO or CISO would provide. I mean, no matter what your business, your organization is, whether it's nonprofit or whatever, I mean, your information is your gold, and if you can't afford the full-time CIO or CISO, you need to have someone there that you can count on, that's keeping their arms around that.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the problem is that people don't even know, right, when they've been hacked. Often hacks will occur and a company won't even know for 6 or 8 months, and that's when they are being vigilant, right? That's when they have someone who is kind of watching over their systems. So these smaller companies are just as much at risk as any other company, but they don't have the capability or the skill set to recognize the dangers. And so from a CISO perspective, right, that becomes super critical, because things like ransomware, phishing, these are all, they continue to be problems because they keep working. People keep using them because they work. And so, from a security perspective, super, super important. Just from an IT strategy perspective, the things that a CIO watches over from a strategic perspective, super important. So Eric, I think your question was actually, what are the common problems? Those are the problems, right? It's a lack of understanding of the cybersecurity. It's systems that maybe age and people don't maintain them. They think, hey, once we put something in place, we're off to the next problem. They're not looking at how to keep things running, functioning, moving. And that's where this whole concept of my second book comes into play, which is this concept of tech debt, because not enough attention is paid to existing systems. And I equate this to like driving a car, right? When you drive a car, you go to the gas station, you fill up the gas tank, and you go. And this is what companies do. They hire people and they go and they set in their processes, whatever they're going to do. Whatever they're selling, they keep selling. So they keep putting gas in the engine. But if you don't change the oil, that car is going to stop no matter how much gas you put in it. At some point, it's just going to die, right? Same thing with technology. So new systems, hiring more people, that's putting the gas in the engine. But maintaining those systems, making sure that you're staying up to date on your patches, making all that mundane stuff that anybody who's not in IT is never going to think about. Those are the things that can end up killing your company. And those are the same problems in every industry.
Yeah, that's a powerful metaphor. You know, the gas, putting gas in your car versus doing the maintenance, which is the oil. I think that really shines a light on how critical what you do is to businesses. Now, you mentioned tech debt, so we might as well go ahead and get into this right now, because I've heard you describe tech debt as like the most challenging aspect of IT, and kind of like the biggest problem that we see in IT. Can you, in layman's terms, can you describe what tech debt is and why it's such an issue?
Yeah. So the concept of tech debt, I can't take credit for that term. The term tech debt was coined by Ward Cunningham back in the early 2000s, I think, when we were first talking about agile. So we have this whole process in software development. There's a waterfall process, and then the agile process is more iterative. And as he was one of the original signers of the Agile Manifesto, so Ward Cunningham came up with this idea. And he said, look, in software development, custom software development, often software developers are trying to hit a specific date, or they're being pushed for whatever reason to get their code out the door, right? We've got to get the code out, start getting revenue for this thing, get it in service, whatever it is. So because of that, they may make some decisions that will work in the short term, but in the long term, they won't continue to function. Specifically, maybe if you're scaling, right? So you put something in place that will work for 10 users, but once you get to 100 users on your system, it's just too slow. It bogs down. There's bottlenecks. And so that's tech debt. This is the traditional definition of tech debt, right? Is maybe a bad decision that was made in order to hit a date or to get something out the door. So the concept of tech debt from my perspective, so as a CIO, I'm responsible for much more than software development. We have cloud solutions, we have data running through our systems, we have all kinds of disparate systems that have the same data. So all kinds of things now in a very complex enterprise IT world. But the concept of tech debt still applies. So when you talk about layman's terms, in my definition, tech debt is anything in your tech stack that is holding your company back from achieving its goals. So let's say that your company says, look, we want to scale. We've now solidified our processes. We've got all of our headcount in place. We're ready to go. We just want to go now from 100 users to 100,000 users. Well, if your technology on the back end won't support that, if you don't have the database that will allow you to grow, you don't have the systems in place that can handle that type of throughput, then your technology is going to hold you back. That's tech debt. Now, the one unique thing here or one of the unique things that I bring out in the book is this idea that tech debt is not always a result of a bad decision. It may be the right decision at that time, but over time, it now requires you to go back and make a change, right? And so again, coming back to your question, specifically talking about this in layman's terms, one of the reasons that I wrote the book was because I wanted to help people think about tech debt differently. And the way that I do that is by using terms that other executives already understand. So executives, CFOs, CEOs, they understand the concept of financial debt leverage, right? If you're going to bring on some additional financial debt, you leverage your company a little bit so that you can go use those funds to grow your company. Well, tech debt's the same way. So we need to think about tech debt in terms of tech debt leverage. How leveraged is your tech stack? And are there things in your tech stack that maybe aren't aligned with your complete strategic goals, and that might hold you back? Well, that's part of your tech debt leverage. You're never going to be at zero. You're never going to be completely unleveraged. So the key is to understand, how leveraged are you? And is it a problem or not? Right? Just like with financial debt, how leveraged are you from a financial perspective? And is it a problem or not? Right? So when we start thinking in those terms, we can start thinking more about our tech stack and figuring out, where do we need to go change the oil so that our engine can keep running.
Thank you for that. So Ted, please jump in. Love to hear your experience with this.
No, I mean, just in everything that he's saying about that, and each environment is different, right? And you just can't come in and just do anything in any place, right? You got to come in, you got to be able to do an assessment and have an understanding of infrastructure and all of that. And as much as we may want to come in and bring in just drop in the latest and greatest and think we're going to get kind of the maximum kind of return on that investment. Again, every situation is different, and that's where having that CIO or that fraction of a CIO, someone in there, right, that can make those types of work along with the executives in an organization and make those types of decisions is so critical.
Awesome. All right. We are here talking with Dr. Ken Knapton about the biggest IT problem that's keeping you from driving revenue. And we're talking about how you need to leverage your tech debt. And Dr. Ken has just given us a very clear explanation of what it is and how to leverage it. So you talked about your book, Unveiling Tech Debt. And toward the end, we'll let people know where they can get it and all that good stuff. You also wrote another book that you mentioned earlier called Cyber Safety. Tell us about that. What's the reader going to gain from reading it?
Yeah, so Unveiling Tech Debt, that's a book that I published just this year, and its focus is specifically businesses, CEOs, CFOs, focused very much in the business world. Cyber Safety is a book I wrote more than 10 years ago, and its target audience is really families. So it's not a business book. It's focused on parents trying to navigate this digital world and how to, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, this concept of digital immigrants and digital natives. So parents being the digital immigrants, I try to take social media, all of the technology things that we have today that our kids are getting access to. And I try to help parents understand in layman's terms, you don't have to go get a computer science degree to be able to understand how to navigate this digital world as your children are gaining access to these things and being much more comfortable and familiar with them than you are as a parent, right? So that's the very different audiences for these two books. Very, very different concepts.
Okay. So, I mean, you've accomplished a lot and you're accomplishing a lot as we speak. I mean, what do you see for yourself on the horizon that hasn't happened for you yet?
Boy, I don't know. It's, like I said earlier on, I think that I consider myself to be a lifelong learner, and I never really thought that I was going to go down the certification route. As you mentioned, I have a doctorate. I've gone through the academic process. But now I'm working on, I've got my CISSP certification, working on my CISO, my CCISO certification. So those are things I never thought I would do. So, what's next? I don't know. I'm the only thing I do know is I'm not done yet. I know there's still things to learn. And that's one of the things that has been fascinating in my career. As we've mentioned, I've been in a lot of different industries, and it's really, really fun to come into a new industry and see how that industry operates. Going from healthcare into a bank and then to a credit repair company, very, very different operations, very different customers, very different revenue models. And yet they all have the exact same IT problems, the exact same challenges. Yeah.
That is so funny that you say that. I have that conversation with peers all the time where I'm like,
Yeah.
it's still IT, right? It's still still data. It still needs to be secured. It still has, personal identifiable information. I mean, it's still the same, whether it's, the government, a bank, or, some pizza restaurant, right? I mean, and so that's why I think oftentimes a person that's a CIO or a person like yourself that's a fractional CIO can support multiple industries, right? And still be able to provide value, even though the mission of those different organizations is unique. The challenges are often the time the challenges are not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the challenges are all the same. You've got to protect your data. You have to be concerned about personally identifiable information. You have to be good data stewards. You have to make sure that you're focused on cybersecurity and protecting your information. You have to keep your systems running. You have to make sure you have the appropriate throughput, the appropriate bandwidth, your appropriate capabilities. Build versus buy decisions, right? Do we build it in-house? Do we go out? All of these things are exactly the same, whether you're dealing with healthcare, financial services, or anything else. And so,
cloud is cloud.
Yeah, right. Cloud versus on-prem, right? And do we go through this digital transformation? Do we move out to the cloud? Do we bring it back in? What do we do? These are, I tell people that they look at my resume and they say, "Man, you've been all over the place." I say, "Yeah, well, I've been doing the same job for 25 years.
Right.
I've just been doing it for different people, but it's exactly the same job."
Right. That's right. Hey, Dr. Ken, AI. Talk to us about that a little bit. I mean, you can't have a conversation about anything now without AI being a part of that. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, AI. So obviously there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of, and I think there's a lot of value that AI can bring. So first of all, I'll give you kind of the cliche answer that I think everybody, has heard, but AI is not going to replace people. AI is not going to, people are not going to lose their jobs because of AI. However, people who know how to use AI are going to take the jobs from people who don't. So AI is extremely powerful. It is Still, I think, a bit overhyped, but it is a very, very powerful tool. Now, I told you I was going to give you the kind of cliche answer. Now to move into kind of the more specifically in my area of expertise, big data and tech debt. And both of them apply very directly to an organization's ability to leverage AI. So these generative AI models, they're all built on large language models on the back end. Well, what is a large language model? It's just a whole bunch of data, right? Huge, large amounts of data. Well, one of the most common ways for companies to leverage AI today is through what's called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. So you take your LLM, your large language model, you take your generative AI model, and then you're going to feed into that model your own data from your company. And now you can essentially interact with your data. Right? You can say, look, these are our specs, these are our customer service issues, whatever they are. We're going to feed them into the model, and now we can use AI to talk directly to our data from our company. Well, that sounds like nirvana, and that is, like I said, one of the most popular uses of AI today. The problem is, companies are starting to realize that their data is messy. It's not clean. And so now you run smack into that brick wall of garbage in, garbage out. You take this beautiful AI model, you take all of your garbage data, put it into the model, you're going to get garbage out. So data is tech debt for companies because they haven't maintained their data. They don't know what their single source of truth is. They have multiple locations, data sprawl, right? So all this data all over the place. And they think, well, AI is going to solve the problem for us. We could just put all that into the AI model and we can get the answers that we haven't been able to get from our data analysts for years. Well, they find out very quickly that's not true. The AI is going to give you the same answer that your data analysts have been giving you because it's not the data analysts that are struggling. It's your data. So we have to go back and clean up our data in order to leverage AI more appropriately.
So let me ask you this question, Dr. Ken. It's probably rewinding the tape a bit. So in Dr. Ken's definition, I'm asking for a friend. What is AI?
So when we talk about AI currently, the most common vernacular of AI is generative AI, which is this whole concept of ChatGPT and Llama and all these other models that are out there that you can communicate with to ask it questions and it'll bring information back. That's generative AI. But in general, AI as artificial intelligence is actually a much larger concept. Generative AI is only one segment of the overall AI. And so you have artificial intelligence, which really means can computers think in ways similar to a human being? And the common misconception is that generative AI is the computer thinking. It's not. It's not doing any thinking. Generative AI is simply a system looking at a whole bunch of data and looking at from a purely mathematical perspective, how frequently does this word appear in conjunction with this word? And so when you ask it a question, it looks at the words you're asking, it looks through its whole huge set of data, and it comes back with words that are commonly associated.
Mm.
And that's how generative AI works. It's not actually thinking.
Mm.
It's just a model that says, how often does this word appear in connection with this word, and how many words apart from it are they? And that's how generative AI works. But AI itself is a much larger concept in the machine learning kind of realm. So it goes far beyond the generative AI that people talk about.
So, like, what recommendations do you have as far as like somebody they're listening to us and they heard what you said when you said people that don't know how to use AI are going to take the jobs. Or people that do know how to use HR, they're going to take the jobs from people who don't. What are some things that people can do to improve their knowledge of AI? Any specific types of courses you'd recommend, or?
Yeah, so two things come to mind, and I don't have any specific courses or things like that. There's plenty of them. You can research them and find them. But two things come to mind. One is, don't be afraid of AI, especially generative AI. People are afraid of generative AI for whatever reason. Use it because the whole key to leveraging generative AI correctly is the prompt, the question that you ask, the way that you ask the question. And so go use ChatGPT, Llama, these others that are out there. Go interact with them. There's one called Not Diamond, which is a great solution. It takes multiple generative AI models and allows you to choose between them, and it'll generate answers from both of them, and you can look, see which one's better. But I would say go experiment with generative AI. And again, I think there's a lot of workflows that can be improved by utilizing AI. Now, don't rely completely on the answer, because again, the computer isn't actually thinking. It's just pulling random words based on what you've asked. So learn how to ask the questions in a way that the AI is going to answer them for you. And then make sure that you are putting your eyes on that answer and validating the response. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second one I would say is clean up your data. And again, this goes back to the conversation we've been having this whole time. I haven't run into a company yet in all of the industries I've worked in, all the companies I've worked at. I have not run into a company yet who really knows how to manage their data. Companies are very good at accumulating data. They're not very good at deleting it. They're not very good at maintaining it. But they're very good at generating it. And so what we have is we start to have these piles of data spread throughout the company, some in databases, some in Excel spreadsheets or wherever else. And that just has to be addressed. That's all pure tech debt, because until you clean up your data, you're not going to be able to feed that into an AI model and get any valuable information out of it.
Oh, that's great. Ted, you were going to say something?
No, I just wrote a note.
Okay. All right. So we're coming to Ted's favorite part of the show. It's called Write This Down. This is where
It's not my favorite part, Dr. Kim. It's not.
So
Okay.
this is where we each go around and leave one takeaway, at least one takeaway, with our listeners and viewers that they need to write down so they can level up. That's one takeaway from today's episode. So, Dr. Ken, you're the guest of honor. What do the people need to write down from today's episode?
So I would say they need to write down, they need to remind themselves to measure their tech debt. Figure out your tech debt leverage. So go measure it, quantify it, so that you can have conversations with your executive team about your tech debt leverage.
That's great. Measure your tech debt. Write that down. Thank you. All right, Ted.
I think that what I was thinking is that the mission the mission may be different, but the technology challenges are similar, right? I think that just, no matter what that industry is or the mission of that organization, you still have to, you're still concerned about tech debt, right? You're still, concerned about how you're going to secure that information, how you're going to, transport that information, how you're going to store it, how you're going to do whatever to it. But the difference is that mission, what that organization is trying to do, whether it's health sector or energy sector or government sector or automotive sector, right, real estate, whatever. But you're still going to have to deal with technology challenges, and it's not going anywhere. And the other thing is all of us are technologists, right? All of us are technologists now. So everybody's walking around with a smartphone, and what that smartphone does, Dr. Ken, I'm sure you agree, is more than probably campus-wide systems used to do 30 years ago. Right. Yeah. So your kid is carrying a server around. So yeah.
Yep. Write that down. So my contribution for this segment, I think it goes back to what Dr. Ken just said a little while ago. The people who know how to use AI, they're going to take the jobs from the people who don't. And it's just another subtle reminder that we have to be constantly evolving. The people that are, if everything is changing, right, and evolution is inevitable, if the only thing that doesn't change is you, he's going to be behind the 8 ball. I don't care what you're doing. Whether you're talking IT, whether you're talking whatever, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. You don't want to be behind the 8 ball. So you just have to constantly grow and make the best of it. I just think this has been a fantastic episode. Like, if this is an episode, you can know little to nothing about IT and still get a lot of helpful takeaways. Just, Dr. Ken, thank you for the way you presented what you presented today. You presented some things that could be very complex, but you made it very easy to understand.
And I guarantee you that Eric at the dinner table tonight is going to bring up tech debt a couple
Exactly.
times, and they're going to be like,
Very
what?
nice. He's going to talk about the oil and the gas.
You want me just to get you the remote, Dad? You want me to just get you the remote? Tech debt. What is that?
I'm going to call my son a digital native. That's the next thing.
That's another one. Good.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, hey, thank you so much for having me. This has been a whole lot of fun, and I really appreciate the invitation to come and chat with you guys. It's been enjoyable.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great. So what's the best way for people to connect with you, to get get your books, or even inquire about your services?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just Dr. Ken Knapton out there. And as far as the book goes, it's available on Amazon. Unveiling Tech Debt is the one that we've been talking about today. And yeah, you're welcome to go out there and grab a copy. It's a short book, and I hope it's an easy read.
Fantastic. All right. So again, thank you, Dr. Ken, for everything that you shared. And speaking of sharing, those of you listening or watching, don't forget to share the show.
Share the show.
That's right. Don't keep this a secret. And don't forget also that you can go on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of those podcasting platforms, and hit that subscribe button. You can listen to the episode. You can also hit the subscribe button, and that way you never miss a future episode. So that's our time for this week on the 30 Minute Hour podcast. And until next time, have a great one.